swinging chairs.
They would call Jacqueline Robledo. Good morning, ma'am. Would you please introduce yourself to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury by telling them your name and then spelling it so the court reporter gets it right, okay?
Okay, I'm Jacqueline Robledo, and it's spelled Jacqueline and Robledo.
And Ms. Robledo, generally, where do you live?
In Cobb County.
How long have you lived in Georgia?
All my life.
Where were you living back, excuse me, in June of, I guess starting in 13 into 2014, where were you living?
Gwinnett.
How old are you?
22.
At the beginning of 2014, say January, how old were you?
19.
Making you do math, sorry about that.
Sorry.
Okay. Back then when you were 19, were you ever active on social media, messaging and things like that?
I was.
Okay, and what type of applications or things did you use to message or talk with people?
Facebook, Kick. I think that's about it.
Okay. Do you remember an application called Whisper?
I do.
Okay. Did you use that one very often?
In the beginning, yeah.
I'm going to turn your attention back to early 2013, okay? Do you remember posting something on the application Whisper about having seen the movie 50 Shades of Grey?
I do.
During that time, when you had posted that, did you get a response from anybody that you later learned to be a person by the name of Justin Ross Harris?
Yes.
When you see, the jury's already heard about Whisper, but was this some response to your post? Was it in the form of a private message?
It was.
And tell the ladies and gentlemen, just if you remember, how the conversation went initially.
I don't really remember exactly, but I do know that it immediately went sexually.
And pretty soon on there, did you switch to you and the person that had responded, the defendant, Mr. Harris? Did you go to a different application to communicate?
Yes.
Okay, and what application was that?
Kick.
Initially, when you guys were talking online, did he tell you how old he was?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And what did you understand around how old he was?
In his 30s.
Now, initially, when you were messaging, did he tell you, did you have any idea he was married or had a kid or anything like that?
I did not.
Okay. And we'll talk about it later on. Did you eventually find out?
Yes.
I'm going to talk to you a little bit about between you first started messaging him up until the summer of 2013. What was the nature generally of your messaging?
Just back and forth, everyday stuff, and then there was also sexual as well.
Okay. And would this involve him sending photographs of his body to you?
Yes.
And vice versa?
Yes.
During this time, did the defendant ever try to get you to meet up with him or anything of that nature?
Very often.
At some point in the summer of 2013, did you actually agree?
I did.
Now, when you joined, or you first started talking on Whisper to the defendant, had you just gone through anything that caused you to start using social media and things like that?
Yes, I was going through a big breakup.
And tell the jury, can you explain how did his chats with you make you feel while leading up to you going to meet up with him?
Well, I felt pretty flattered just because I was getting attention from something else, and when I was going through the breakup and stuff, it hurt a lot, so it kind of helped a little bit.
Were you having some self-esteem issues at the time?
I was.
In 2013, he asked you, and you finally said yes, you would meet up. Where were you going to go? And do you remember what time of day it was?
It was at night, and it was at his house.
And when you say a house, was it a house, an apartment, or something
An
else?
apartment, I believe, because it was at the bottom floor.
Now, when you went to this apartment, what did you do when you got there initially? Did you just knock on the door?
He was there waiting because I texted him that I was there.
And when you went inside, tell the ladies and the gentlemen in the jury what happened.
Oh, we had sex.
Did he seem nervous or anything?
Not at all.
Did you notice anything? Do you remember anything? Pictures of a possible wife or children or anything at that point in the living room?
Not that I noticed, no.
After this this encounter in the summer of 2013, did you guys keep up with an online relationship?
I wouldn't call it a relationship. I mean, I guess a friendship. But,
Yes, okay.
Yeah, we still talk throughout the time.
Okay. Now, did you guys ever meet up again?
No.
Okay. Up until in June of 2014, did he continue to try to get you to meet up with him?
Weekly.
Now, what times did he usually, as far as you remember, message you? What time of day?
Usually in the mornings or during his work day.
So it didn't appear to bother him that he was at work or anything like that?
Objection calls for speculation.
Okay. I'll rephrase it. Did he appear to have any problem messaging you while he was at the work?
Not that I noticed.
Now, at some point, did he mention, did he talk to you about the fact that he had a wife and a child?
Yes, he did.
And before he mentioned it, had you talked to him about your love of kids?
Yes.
So tell the jury a little about that.
I have kids that I watch. I want to go into kids after I graduate, so I've always liked kids.
At some point after you were discussing this, did he know that you like children?
Yes.
Okay. Did he tell you that he had a child and a wife?
Eventually he did.
Okay. And how did that come up?
We were playing a question game, which we did periodically just to pass time.
And just tell the jury, what do you mean by a question game?
Like he would ask a question, I'd answer. I would ask a question, he'd answer.
Okay. When he told you that he was married, did he say anything? Do you remember when it was? How soon after the encounter in the summer of 13?
I don't.
Did he say anything about his family life or how his marriage was at the time?
I know he was unhappy.
During the times you were messaging him, did he from time to time, did you talk to him or ask him about his son?
Yes, I did.
And did you know his son's name?
Yes, I did.
Now, would he volunteer things or would you ask him about his son?
I would have to ask.
Now, were there times that you actually asked him about him and he would send pictures and say, he's great, he's a perfect kid, things like that? Okay. I'll rephrase it. What would he say about his son?
That he was great and that he loved his son.
Now, in addition to being, having problems in his marriage, did he ever tell you about him being caught, either messaging or something like that by his wife?
He did.
Okay, what did he tell you?
He disappeared for a while, and then he finally messaged me again, and I was like, oh, well, there you are. And he's like, yeah, I was caught, so I need to lay low for a while.
And do you remember how long ago that was?
I don't.
During the time you're messaging, did he ever talk about and relay to you that he was actively choosing a life outside of his marriage to hook up with other people and things like that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you remember a chat from February 2014 where he talked about that, meeting a random person?
I do.
Tell the jury about that.
He mentioned that he was on vacation and that he had met up with a guy and had relations with him.
Okay. Did he say what app he used to meet up with him?
Whisper.
So it's safe to, let me ask you this. Did he kind of give you updates about this other life he was leading as it was going along? Now, did you ever save or your chats with the defendant or anything like that yourself?
No, I had no reason to.
Okay. I'm going to show you what I've marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 329. I've already shown it to defense. Ma'am, I'm going to show you what it's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 329. Do you recognize this?
Yes.
Okay, and how do you recognize it?
You showed it to me?
Okay. Do you recognize what's inside of it?
Yes.
Okay, and are these chats between you and the defendant, starting, I guess, only as far as December of 2013, going up until the last chats a couple of days before Cooper died?
Yes.
Okay, and are these exact copies of your chats?
They are.
Okay. And in the first few going up through January, does it only contain the defendant's response to you and not your responses?
It does.
Okay, now you didn't actually prepare these, correct?
Correct.
So you don't know why it only shows up part of it.
Right.
But these are actually statements the defendant made to you about things as well, leading up to when your conversations go back and forth.
Correct.
You're on to your State's Exhibit 329.
Chuck, what was the date where it says it was only his responses?
Starting 12/11/13.
Starting that day or
It starts, that's where the messages start, and then it picks up going both ways, January 29, 2014.
Okay. Judge, same objections, 404, 403, relevance, severance, character, all the things we've discussed already. So I'm going to object on those bases.
Mr. Robledo, could you tell the jury, what was your screen name that you used on Kik?
It was Jackie, Excellent X.
Okay. And looking at it, what was the screen name that the defendant used?
Bama XH. Bama XH, looks like.
I'm not going to go through and go through every chat in that chat book or anything, but did it continue off and on conversations in sexual nature up until the last time you messaged him?
About, yeah.
And on June 15th, 2014, did you actually send him a text about Father's Day?
I did.
Okay, and how did he respond?
Thanks.
And on that day, did he send any pictures of Cooper or say anything else about him?
No.
That's all I have, Judge.
Ross.
Is it Robledo?
Robledo.
Robledo, okay, sorry. All right, so you actually interviewed with the Cobb Police Department 2 times?
I think so.
And did you come in both times for a face-to-face interview?
I came in once.
All right. So the first time you spoke to Cobb Police, that was actually a telephone interview with Detective Racy?
Yes.
Right. And then you came in that same day, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you came in that same day, and you gave a second interview with Detective Racy and Detective Stoddard.
Sir.
Okay. And that one's Stoddard right there?
I think so.
Okay. And
It was a while ago.
Racy's not in. You don't see Mr. Detective Racy, do you?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right, and this would have been, oh gosh, all the way back in July of 2014?
Probably around there.
Is that fair to say?
I think so.
Okay. And you had seen what happened on the news, correct?
Correct.
Did you call the Cobb Police? Did you contact them and let them know that You knew Ross Harris?
No, sir.
You did not? Okay. You knew that Ross had been arrested?
Yes.
And you knew that he'd been charged with murder?
Yes.
Okay. But you didn't reach out to the police department and say, hey, I've got some information that might be important?
Correct.
Because you didn't think anything you knew had anything to do with what happened on June the 18th, right?
That's right.
Okay. So you said you were using Whisper, and this would have been back in 2013?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember what month you started using Whisper in 2013?
Probably around January, because that was when went through the breakup.
Okay. And we've heard a little bit about Whisper, but basically it's an app where you can post all kind of random thoughts, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then it just basically goes out to anybody that's got the application in the area, and they can respond if they want to.
That's correct.
So, in that regard, it's kind of like how Facebook works. If you're a friend with someone on Facebook, it would sort of come to your feed on your phone, and you could read it or not, or respond or not.
I don't think that it's friend-wise, because I don't think that you can make friends on
Right.
there besides the messaging, but you can just scroll on there and see what's up.
Okay. And is that how you would normally use it? You would just kind of scroll through and see if there was an image or some posting or thought that was funny
Correct.
or interesting? And sometimes you respond, sometimes you wouldn't.
Yes, sir.
All right, so what we talked about this morning is you had posted a whisper that had to do with 50 Shades of Grey.
Yes, sir.
All right, and I haven't seen it, but my understanding is 50 Shades of Grey is a movie adapted from a novel that had to do about submissive and domination type sexuality.
Yes, sir.
Is that fair to say?
Mhm.
Did you read the book?
I did.
All right. And did you see the movie?
I did.
Which was better?
The book, definitely.
It always is. And so, for whatever reason, it was interesting.
Right.
You thought it was interesting. Do you remember what it was specifically that you posted on that whisper?
I do not.
All right. So you don't recall if it was a question like, hey, has anybody seen this, or does anybody know about this subject?
Not that I remember.
All right. Just that was essentially the subject matter that you posted.
Correct.
Okay. And your recollection is that Ross responded,
Yes, sir.
and that's what kind of initiated y'all's conversation?
Yes, sir.
This would have been May of 2013?
That sounds about right.
That sounds about right. Do you know how long it was that y'all had communicated on Whisper before you actually hooked up?
Yes. We talked for a few months beforehand because I didn't want to just meet up with random people.
Okay. All right, so you talked for a few months, and was it primarily on that app, or were you primarily communicating on Kik?
I think Kick, because Whisper App's chat was really shifty.
Okay. It wasn't as secure, it wasn't as
Right.
good for a one-on-one type chat. All right, so y'all would communicate on Kik, and a lot of the communications would have been sexual in nature?
Well, yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Mhm.
All right, and so then, if I understand what happened, summer of 2013, you hooked up at his house,
Yes, sir.
all right? And I believe what you told Detective Racy was it was spur of the moment, let's do this.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And is it fair to say you actually referred to it as sort of a booty call hookup?
One night stand.
One night.
Yes.
Okay. And that one night stand actually was a very quick encounter, wasn't it?
Yes.
I believe you told detectives you were in and out.
Yes, sir.
The entire time you were in that apartment was just a couple of minutes.
Longer than a couple of minutes. But
Well,
45 minutes or so.
45 minutes, all right. So, and this happened on the sofa?
Yes, sir.
In the living room? Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
Essentially the main room when you come off the door?
Yes, sir.
Right. All right. Yeah, you told Detective Racy literally in and out,
Yes, sir.
and that was it? Was a hookup?
Yes, sir.
And there certainly wasn't anything remarkable in the way of 50 Shades of Grey type scenario, right?
No, sir.
You described it as nothing out of the norm.
Correct.
So, basically, sexual encounter.
Yes, sir.
All right. And let's see. You, I believe that you told Detective Racy that Ross never discussed leaving his wife.
No, sir.
Is that fair to say? That's not something he discussed.
No.
And you actually told Detective Racy that, as far as you knew, he loved his wife and wanted to be with her.
Yes, sir.
And when you talked to Detective Racy, that would have been July of 2014.
Right on, sir.
And at that point in time, you would have been, other than the one time hookup we talked about, you would have been conversing with Ross periodically on messaging service such as Kik for, I'm assuming at that point in time, it would have been more than a year?
Yes, sir.
All right. And after all that time, that was the impression that you conveyed to the police department, was as far as you knew, he loved his wife and wanted to be with her. That's true, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
All right. And Ross told you that his son was great and he loved his son.
Yes, sir.
You never once heard Ross say anything or text anything to you that was ugly or negative about his son.
No. We didn't talk very much about it.
Right. But when you did talk about him, it was all very affirming and positive and loving, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to show you what's been admitted as, I guess, State's Exhibit 329. And I want you to take a look. These are really small here, but if you see that, you can see the date right there. That's really big. So I want you to take a look at this date.
Okay.
April the 2nd, 2014. Can you see that?
I can.
All right. And during your communication that day, see, this one is you, right?
Yes.
Jacqueline's. That's you.
Yes, sir.
All right. And you asked Ross, and your little son, and what was his response?
The best ever.
Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. And he sent you a little picture of Cooper, didn't he?
Yes, sir.
And you responded, so adorable. I love his eyes. And he responded, he's the best. And it's those type of communications regarding Cooper that led you to be able to give that opinion to the police department that Ross loved his son, right?
Right.
Now, no doubt there's a lot of really extremely filthy sort of communications that were going on in these kick messages. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
Right. And I'm not going to embarrass you to going into any of that, but I do want to go through a couple of things. Y'all discussed some things that are perhaps maybe a little more taboo about sexuality than what might be normal. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And at one point in time, does Ross tell you that he wants to meet you outside because his wife is asleep?
He did.
Okay. But you didn't meet up, did you?
No.
No. Okay. And again, I'm not going to go into any specific nastiness here, but Ross isn't the only person that you've hooked up with from Whisper, is he?
Correct.
And he sent you pictures of his genitals, didn't he?
Yes.
Okay. You weren't some sort of romance, were you?
I'm not sure.
You and Ross weren't involved in like a romance.
No.
Okay. This was all sex, correct?
Correct.
And did he send you some pictures from when they went to the beach?
Possibly. Is that the sunrise one?
They're so small, it's hard for me to see. All right. And so let's look here on May the 27th. Can you see that? All right, so May the 27th, 2014. Now, at this point in time, this would have been like a year after the booty call, right?
Correct.
Okay. And you asked Ross, how's your baby? He said, he's perfect. You say, so cute. And he sent you a picture of Cooper, right?
Correct.
And you say, so cute. Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. And then he sent you, did you send this picture?
That was mine, yes.
All right. It's really tiny.
It's one of my little ones.
Is that your child?
No.
Okay, this is a child that you keep.
It's one of my best friends.
Okay. Your friend Al's child. So I guess at the end of the day, you had a one-time hookup with Ross that you said was basically an in and out, and over the course of a year, y'all exchanged some sexually graphic discussions back and forth, and some photos as well. Okay, but the entirety of what you know about his son Cooper is that Ross loved him, and he expressed that to you whenever the subject came up.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. All right, thank you.
Jacqueline, when you asked about his son, if he'd said, hey, I'm thinking about killing my son, would you have kept talking to him?
Not at all.
Thank you.
He didn't say anything like that, did he?
No, sir.
He used words like love, adorable, cute, awesome, correct?
Correct.
He's, that's all right.
Nothing further, Judge.
Nice witness.
Gina Malloy.
Hey, Ms. Why don't you start while I look for a couple of pictures by introducing yourself to the jurors.
Good morning. My name is Regina Malloy. Spell that Regina Malloy.
All right, I think I've got what we need here. All right. Ms. Malloy, where do you live generally? You don't have to give us an address.
In Marietta.
Okay. And how long have you lived up in Marietta and Cobb County?
Over 17 years.
And where are you currently employed, ma'am?
At the Home Depot.
And how long have you worked for Home Depot?
As an associate for a little bit over 2 years, but as a contractor in total of over 3.5 years.
Now, we all know that they've got Home Depot retail establishments, and you've also got Home Depot corporate. You're referring to the
I'm
latter.
referring to Home Depot corporate. Yes.
Okay. Why don't you start by explaining to the jury how you came to be involved with Home Depot, first as a contractor and then as an associate?
I had a friend that was working there, and we went to lunch one day, and he told me that he said, well, you know, we're hiring. And I said, oh, okay. And so I went in and actually went and met the manager that would be hiring me eventually. Started as a contractor, working exclusively on the Garden Club website, and after about 1.5 years, was encouraged to apply for a permanent position as an associate.
When you worked as a contractor, did you work for a private company or work for yourself?
I worked for a private company. It was through like an employment agency.
And just generally speaking, what did you do through this private company and as a private contractor? What types of things?
I managed the Garden Club website, so anything on that site, I updated the images, updated the content to make sure that the articles were up to date when it was time for the emails to go out. They sent an email out to the Garden Club members weekly. And so it was my responsibility to make sure that everything that was being promoted was live on the site when the customers got there.
Do you have a computer background by chance?
I do. I've been a graphic designer since 1999.
Okay. And tell me when in time you became an associate with Home Depot after working in a contract basis.
My anniversary date is August 25th, 2014.
Great. So in August of 2014, you started working for them full-time and not through the temporary agency.
Yes.
Are you familiar with the Home Depot treehouse?
I am, yes.
And why don't you tell the jury how it is that you're familiar with the treehouse?
That's where I sit and work every day. That's the only place I've worked.
Okay.
since being at the Home Depot.
At the Home Depot Treehouse, are there other people obviously that work there as well in other departments?
There are. Yes.
Is some of it largely computer-based and electronic-based?
Yes, it's our team, until recently, it was mostly the online team, which is the .com, or the team that runs the website, whether it's IT developers, designers, programmers, even project managers. Anybody having anything to do with the website at that point sat in that building.
And have you always worked, when you've been associated with Home Depot, either as a contractor or as now an associate, have you always worked at that location, the Treehouse location?
Yes, sir.
And during that time, did you come to know of an individual, Justin Ross Harris?
Yes, sir.
And you see him seated here in the courtroom?
Yes, sir.
If you would, just point him out and describe what he's wearing so we make sure we're talking about the same person.
He's over there, he's wearing a pink shirt.
All right. And how is it that you came to know of him while working at the Treehouse location?
As a contractor, I was always trying to just meet people and connect, and a few people knew that I was a musician, but not a lot. And somebody told me that they knew somebody else that played, an instrument too. So
Yeah, I want to talk to you about that. You happen to also have some musical background a little bit, correct?
yes, sir.
Can you tell the jury about that?
My entire life, I've been a musician as well. Started on piano, played clarinet in middle school. I was one of the first female drummers on our drum line in our high school, and in 2010, I graduated from the Atlanta Institute of Music and Media with a certification in bass performance. And music has been a big part of my life. I've always been a musician.
When is it that you first came to know Mr. Harris in any way?
I just kind of walked up to him and introduced myself one day, and I said, hey, I see you bringing your axe in. Axe is what we call our instruments. Most musicians, it's kind of a term that goes back to woodshedding.
Is this conversation you had with him the first real conversation you had, or had you seen him around before?
I'd seen him around before.
All right.
Yeah, we all see each other in the building. Whether you work with each other or not, you just see people.
Prior to seeing him and having this conversation that I'll get to in just a second, did you have any sort of relationship with him? Were you friends, go out to lunch or anything like that?
No, sir.
You just recognize him from being around the building?
Yes, sir.
And is there a parking area outside the treehouse? Can you describe that for the jury a little bit?
Yes, sir. We had, until recently, we had just 2 flat parking lots. It's kind of tree lined. You can tell where they cleared it out to put the parking spaces. I don't even know how many cars it holds, but it's just a flat parking space. It's kind of right out in front of the building.
Okay. We've heard a lot of testimony about what happened on June the 18th of 2014. I assume you're aware of the subject matter of this case and so on and so
Yes,
forth,
sir.
correct?
Yes, sir.
After hearing about what happened, you eventually talked to police about some conversation you had with the defendant about a week before that. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Well, when the conversation?
Yes.
The conversation was earlier.
Okay. Tell me about the first conversation you had with him, and then I want to ask you about something that happened about a week before the 14th.
The first conversation I had with him, we were just talking about, he was walking in with an instrument. I said, I recognize, the case. I said, I have a soft case, but he had a hard case with him. And I was like, yeah, so why would you bring it in? I didn't even bring mine to work because I didn't want people asking me what it was or security going through it, especially as a contractor. But also I never wanted to leave it in the car because as an instrument, the heat will actually destroy it, the cold will destroy it, like any extreme temperatures will actually affect your instrument. And I play the bass, mine is not as temperamental, but I understood because I have tons of friends that play guitar, and it's very important to them. So we were just talking about that, and I think we may have had some people that we knew in common. Talked about, the church you played at, because I played at my church, and I was just trying to see if we knew some of the same people. The circle is pretty small.
Just kind of some small talk with him.
Yeah.
All right, now I want to direct your attention to something that happened about a week before this. Do you remember seeing the defendant and having a conversation with him when he, again, was bringing his guitar case in?
I remember seeing him bring it in.
All right, and tell the jury about that.
Where I sat at the time is right next to the break room, and anytime you go in there, there's a huge wall. It's a huge wall of glass, and you just see people coming and going all day. And I saw him, walking in with the case.
Did you ever have a discussion with him about why he specifically would want to bring it into
the Home Depot Treehouse?
Not on that day, but I had that. That was part of the discussion that we had.
Explain that to the jury.
I'm sorry, that was part of the initial discussion that we had. The fact that, the heat will actually warp your guitar. It'll actually peel the glue. It'll melt it. The glue will start to melt, and so it'll actually cause harm to the guitar and all the money that you spend, on the guitars. And it's not, you want to take care of your instrument, so.
Is that why he said he would bring his guitar into the
Yes, sir.
treehouse?
Yes, sir.
After this happened, you had an occasion to speak to a police officer, an Officer Gallimore, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and we've seen Officer Gallimore testify. He's a pretty big police officer. Can you describe for the jury how it is that you reached out to Officer Gallimore and came into contact with him about what you just shared with the jury?
In all honesty, I didn't reach out to him. It was very surreal, as this whole thing has been. But I was with a friend, and we were talking about, everybody there was kind of just talking about how they couldn't believe this, what had happened. And I told her, about the conversation, and she said, well, you should say something. And I was like, I don't want to be involved. I really don't want to be involved. And she said, you should say something. And so we went to lunch that day. We were sitting outside eating, and she just kept saying, you never know, you should say something. And out walks this cop, and he's just standing there looking around. And she's like, there's a cop right there. Just tell him, I'm sure he can tell somebody. And I just said, wait till I get home, I'll think about it. And she called him over, and it was the officer, and he said that he was actually the one that was that responded, that he was there. So it just, to me, it just all kind of felt like, whoa,
And after speaking to Officer Gallimore, is that when you also talked to the detective about what you knew about him bringing his guitar case in?
Yes, sir. He gave me, he took my number, and someone called me, and I spoke to them.
All right. This is State's Exhibit number 3. I told you we had a picture of Officer Gallimore here in the courtroom, and just looking at State's Exhibit number 3, it's kind of hard to see because it's far away, but is that the officer you spoke with initially?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then you and I also had a conversation about a specific vehicle, the defendant's vehicle. I'm going to show you what's been previously marked and identified as State's Exhibit number 7, which is a photograph of defendant's Tucson. Do you recognize that vehicle?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Had you ever seen that vehicle before in the parking area at the Home Depot?
Yes, sir.
All right. And I want to ask you a little bit about that parking area. You and I had an opportunity to look at an aerial, correct?
Yes.
This is State's Exhibit 231. And looking at 231, tell me if you recognize that as being an aerial of the Home Depot treehouse to include the parking area. We looked at a very similar one upstairs earlier this morning, did we not?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And is this the parking area that you were referring to here?
Yes, sir. It is.
Let's display this for the jury. I want to ask you a couple questions. Is there an area that you normally park at the Home Depot treehouse?
Yes, sir.
Are there assigned spots?
Only for like the director level, executive level, I guess, because they kind of go back and forth between the buildings. So.
Right. Would you mind stepping down and coming closer to the area? I want to ask you a few questions about it. Can everybody see this? Okay. All right, Ms. Moore, what building is this here?
That's the tree house.
Okay.
The entrance.
This is the building where both you and Mr. Harris work, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And is this the parking area that you referred to?
Yes, sir.
Where did you normally park? Can you see the general area that you would park?
I normally park in one of these two spots here.
Right up here? Okay. And you had just shown a photograph of the defendant's vehicle depicted in State's number 7. Where did you normally see that vehicle within the parking lot parked?
Normally it would be in here, like along this walkway, like coming right out of the door. It'd be here.
Normally in here, but not up towards this wood line. Usually it was closer to the building.
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. You talked about seeing the defendant come in with his car case about a week before this happened. And upstairs this morning, I actually showed you some surveillance video. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Envelopes in. This is going to block the number otherwise. You know what, Ron, I can do it this way. Hold on. I'm trying not to block the number, but we looked at some video from June the 11th. I know you don't remember the exact date, but some video footage from June the 11th from the treehouse. Do you remember looking at that with me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then we paused it at a certain point. Did you recognize that as being a fair and accurate depiction of the defendant walking in with that case you described, the guitar case?
Yes, sir.
All right. I'm at Tender States 330. So the flash drive that contains that video footage.
This is the, what's shown on this video footage is what you observed from your office. Is that what you're telling us?
Yes, sir.
Obviously not from the same exact angle, I presume, because the camera's not in your office. But this is what you were talking about earlier. Just when you said you just saw him bringing a guitar case in.
Yes, sir.
This is that same video is what you were telling us about earlier?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. No objection.
All right.
The number again, please, sir.
330. That's in the same page.
Yes. Well, is there an objection?
No, there wasn't.
Mr. Duncan?
I just didn't hear it.
No objection, I just want to know what the number was, Your Honor.
Oh, it's admitted without objection.
I thought so. I just didn't hear the
No,
court.
I'm sorry. I didn't hear him.
So for the record, I'm going to the files from 6/11/2014.
Students, can you turn this way so we can see it over here, please?
Just thank you.
Perfect.
Y'all see, just so I don't have to move this forward. All right, might get you to step down. You're probably the only person in the courtroom that can't see it as well. Can you see it at all? Okay. Is this the video footage that we watched upstairs that you giving testimony about?
Yes, sir.
All right. And what is this that we see here in the defendant's? Looks like it's his right hand.
It's a hard shell guitar case.
The same one you had a previous discussion with him about.
Yes, sir.
Just every time you need that again before you go put it up somewhere.
It's right on the page. Contact me. Okay. I think the last topic I need to talk with you about is, do you remember having a conversation with the defendant? I think it was maybe the day before this all happened about something.
Yes, we were sitting and eating at the in the lunch in the break room, and it was just a group of us. In our building, we don't have a cafeteria, so people would either bring their lunch or go get it and come back. And we only have like three large tables where about 6 people can sit at a time. Unless you pull a chair up, and he didn't have food, but he came in after because I was sitting with some of the people that he knew. I think a lot better. I mean, we spoke to each other, recognized each other, and but the conversation was just general, lunchtime banter.
Okay. Did you ever have a conversation with him about hearing or hearing loss or anything like that?
Yeah, he actually explained about the rocket thing, something traumatic had happened, and that's why he had lost the hearing. Because somebody was sitting on one side of him and he couldn't He didn't hear him, and
Okay.
he explained it.
Now, whether or not that was, is that just what he said, or did you do any independent investigation about how true that might be?
I had no cause to.
It's just a conversation that he shared with you.
Yes, sir.
Is that correct?
We were all at the table. Was everybody there?
All right. Thank you, ma'am. I think that's all I have right now.
Morning, ma'am. Did you say that there was a problem as y'all were having a conversation at the table, that he was unable to hear somebody on one side of him?
Yeah, he explained why.
And that led to him talking about this incident with bottle rocket.
I think it was a bottle rocket or something happened. They were at a party, or I just remember that there was a loud explosion went off, and he said he really never heard anything after that.
And was it something about the bottle rocket actually going in his ear or blowing up right near his ear?
It was very close. I don't remember the exact. I think I was kind of shocked, like, oh my gosh, that's horrible.
Pretty bad.
Yeah.
I got you. And did he talk about what he had to do, surgery to try to reconstruct it, or whatever they could do to it?
I think he did. Yeah.
All right.
Not quite certain.
All right. And but indicated that he still was unable to hear, if at all, very little out of that ear, correct?
Yes.
And you saw that actually play out as y'all were sitting around the table, because you couldn't hear out of one side.
Yes, sir.
All right. And that conversation was, do you remember when that was?
That was, I thought it was the day before. I really feel like that was, because I kept saying, wow, I just saw him yesterday.
I got you.
So,
And was this unusual for you to be sitting down eating lunch with him at that point?
yes, sir.
Okay. And you don't remember seeing him in the lunch area all that often, do you?
No, sir.
And on this, Mr. Evans, I didn't see which one of these that you had played.
It's June the 11th, 2014, Harris Entries.
Entering? All right. What time did you normally get to work?
As a contractor, I tried to get there before 8:30.
Okay. And was that pretty routine for you to get there that early?
Yes, sir.
And were there any days that you would get there after 9 o'clock?
Possibly, but it would be rare.
Very rare.
Yes.
Okay. And so this occasion, you saw Ross entering the house, entering the Home Depot. Is this what you were telling us earlier that you observed? You saw him coming through this door?
After everything happened, I saw him in the parking lot. I did not see this exact thing. My
Okay,
desk
well,
was
that's what I thought
on the
you
other
said.
side of that. Yeah, I saw him walking through the parking lot. And I wasn't sure of the date. I just knew it was like a week before I'd seen.
So you've never seen this before until the district attorney showed this to you.
I saw it this morning, yes.
And whether the day you saw him in the parking lot was June 11th or not, you don't know.
It was the week before.
Okay,
I think
so around that
even I
time
told
frame.
him, yeah.
Okay, very good. And I think your office is somewhere on the outside of the building, which would be to the left of this.
And then my desk would be through those, like as he's coming in,
Yes, ma'am.
and right on that aisle.
So if you took a right, and then you're also be on the
My
right.
desk would be on the left. The break room was on the right.
I got you. Okay. Did you have a window out to the parking lot though?
No.
Okay. You said you saw him going in the parking lot with this case?
Coming into the building.
Okay.
Just get up to go get coffee. I was in the break room and I saw him walking in.
You just saw him walking through the building with it.
Walking through the parking lot, yes, sir.
Okay. You saw him walking through the parking lot, or you saw him walking through the building?
Through the parking lot.
Through the parking, okay.
I was in the building.
Yes, ma'am.
He was coming through the parking lot. There's a big wall of glass that faces the parking lot.
I got you.
So we see people
out
coming
the
in
glass,
all the time.
out the glass that you could see it. I'm
Yes, sir.
with you now. You don't recall ever having been talking to Ross as he was coming to work in the morning, anything of that nature? Like walking through the parking lot together, anything like that?
No, sir.
Okay. And this is 9:09, which gives us some 30 minutes past the time you would normally be there anyway, correct? And did you ever walk with him out of the building?
No. No, the conversation we had, I stopped him, I think, before he was out of the building one day.
All right. Is it fair to say then that you were never out in the parking lot when he would come in the mornings?
No, sir, I was not.
Okay. And you don't recall ever being out in the parking lot when he would leave in the day, middle of the day? Or not, excuse me, middle of the end of the day?
I don't recall.
Okay. All right. But you think you know where he parked his car?
Yeah.
Okay. And was there something unique about his car that made you think that you knew where he was parking his car?
Not necessarily unique, but everybody kind of parks in the same spot. You just start recognizing cars. So it's just a matter of like, I know certain cars park in certain places. Some people get there before I do, and their cars are always in the same, a very close place. And even me, if I can't get to the exact spot, I always park in a closer spot, one that's kind of close to it. So.
All right. Do you ever remember seeing Mr. Harris's car in the lot before you got there at 8:30?
Rarely. I don't remember specifically.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, do you remember ever seeing it still in the parking lot whenever time you would leave for the day?
Sometimes, yes.
What time do you normally leave?
As a contractor, I would leave around 4:30.
Okay.
I was really doing my 8 hours because I was hourly at that point, so I would do my whatever time.
Makes sense.
To
8:30
the minute.
4:30. I got you. And so you said you think you saw his car sometimes when he would be leaving?
Yes, sir.
And would this be a couple times, 3 times, 10 times? Just sometimes?
Yeah, just sometimes.
But you never associated it with Mr. Harris because you've never seen him connected with that car?
No, sir.
Okay. Did someone indicate to you a particular car that was his?
No, sir. I'm a designer, so I see colors and shapes and logos. Those things stick out and matter to me.
Okay.
And so it's actually, for me, it's a pattern in the parking lot. Certain cars are in certain places, and I recognize. There's a black Porsche that always parks in the same spot. There's a green Nissan Ranger parked truck that parks in the same spot. I know all the directors' cars because they're all numbered. So I guess it's kind of the way my brain works.
I got you. And what kind of car was Mr. Harris driving that you're aware of?
Just from what they told me this morning, it's a silver car. It was an SUV.
Who told you that?
We were upstairs on the picture. They said that was a car, and I saw it on the news. So
Who's we?
Yes.
This nice gentleman right here?
Yes, I'm
Who's just
sorry.
asking a question?
Yes.
He showed you a picture and told you this is the car?
No, the news said that.
Oh, the news said that?
Mhm.
I got you. And so this is something you've seen on the news after the incident, obviously?
Yeah, it was on the news immediately.
I got you. And when you ran into Officer Gallimore, that was after there had been quite a bit of news in the Atlanta area about this, correct?
Yes.
And were you kind of keeping up with it or just watching it as it was on?
No, I was trying not to. It's hard enough.
It just bothered you too much. I got you. And you don't watch any court proceedings or anything like that on the TV about it?
No, sir.
I noticed looking at here in this video, you recognize what's in Mr. Harris's left hand here?
Mm-hmm.
What does that appear to be?
What's up? Food,
Okay.
beverage bag.
Does it look like Chick-fil-A?
I think so. As it kept going, it looked like it was a Chick-fil-A bag. And so
Something we're pretty familiar with in the Atlanta area, correct?
yes, sir.
Well, I guess a lot of people are, but it seems like we have them on every corner. You ever see that quick?
Yeah, so it's a red shape with the chicken and logo. I recognize the logo.
That.
Yes, sir.
Do you ever remember seeing Ross coming with Chick-fil-A pretty regularly in the mornings? Or do you just didn't see him?
I didn't really see him in the morning.
Okay. All right. When you were meeting with the detective ultimately about the case, do you remember which detective you met with?
No, I just had a phone call.
Okay. So you didn't meet with anybody in person, it was just a telephone call?
Yes,
Okay. Does the name Murphy ring a bell with you at all?
So
That's how that could be. Okay. And you remember when you were talking to him about your recollection, before we get too far, the conversation about the guitar that you had talking to Ross about it, that was well before this.
yes, sir.
Okay. Was that maybe a year before, or do you recall? Good or bad?
It was before,
At least several months.
at least, yeah, because I remember that until he was in the cafeteria the day before that, I hadn't really had interaction with him.
So I just want to make sure we're clear that there's two totally separate conversations we're talking about. One many months before about the star,
Yes.
and then shortly before about the year.
Yes.
All right. When you were talking to Detective Murphy, do you remember that you were telling him about the whole incident and you just really weren't sure what to think about it, obviously? But you told him, did you not, that it's only fair to take a look at everything. Remember telling him that?
Yes, sir.
And you told him that in reference to talking about thinking where he might have been parking his car, correct?
Well, I was not sure about, like, why I guess I even had the conversation that we had the year before, or whenever that earlier conversation, and for it to be about leaving not leaving the guitar in the car, it just all bothered me, and I wasn't sleeping, and I don't remember specifically being about the car or where he parked.
Do you remember telling Detective Murphy, I hope y'all can pull the videos to see about where he actually does park his car?
I did say that, but I did not want to be involved, and I wanted them to just use footage. I did not want to be sitting right here.
Absolutely. Thought it might be good to investigate and actually get some objective evidence.
Yes, sir.
I got you. And have you been shown any other videos other than this one?
No, sir.
Let me show you. You used a map here. I think I have one a little bit bigger. I'll show this to you. I don't think we've tendered it yet, Mr. Evans. I'll refer to it.
What's the exhibit number?
I think it'll be D35. I think is right. I'll show you this to you. I did it my first one that showed the race coming to the jury. So make sure I don't hit anybody sitting over there. This is also an aerial map of the treehouse location, correct? It's a little bit zoomed in close so we can kind of see the parking lot a little bit clearer. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And is that truly and accurately depicts that area in an aerial map version?
Yes, sir.
We'd, I believe it's D35, we moved that tendered into evidence, Sean.
How do you check? Mr. Long, can I ask you a question? No, what's that?
Oh, that says treehouse parking.
Okay.
I'll take it off. Thank you. All right. Now, if you would, if I could ask you to please step down as well. Mr. Evans, be able to see this. You might sit down this way, please. If you'll come this way, actually, I may think. This gentleman on the far end can see it on that corner. This lady right here in this corner can see it, and we're in good shape. You were talking, showing Mr. Evans, I think you indicated that you believe this area kind of here and this lot, this line, I'm going to say it runs perpendicular with the tree house. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
That's where you identified as where you thought you had seen Mr. Harris's car before.
Yes, sir.
Correct? And that was the car that you had been shown a picture of by the district attorney this morning, correct?
Yes, sir.
And where you normally park was somewhere along that line as well?
No, sir, I normally parked in here,
Very good.
the second and third spot.
And so, and just for the purposes of the record, when we say in here, talking about the third section of cars that run parallel with the tree house, correct?
Yes, sir.
And was there a particular space that you would pull into and park in?
Well, I was trying to park here, but sometimes somebody beat me to it, so I parked
Okay. Trying to be as close to the end of the line as possible, closer to the.
This is the only entrance into the treehouse. This is emergency only.
Very good. And when Mr. Harris parked his vehicle on June 18th, you don't have any idea where that was?
No, sir.
All right. And the last time that you remember seeing it parked in this area, do you have any idea when that was?
No, sir.
All right. And you certainly wouldn't do a survey around the parking lot to see where anybody else was parked, correct?
Not on purpose, but
All right.
just daily I remember certain cars.
All right. And do you remember seeing him parked right here in this line? Right in front of the
reserved-
treehouse?
That's reserved for directors, so if he was there, it could have been like a special occasion, but I don't know.
All right.
Sometimes we win prizes and you get to park in a director's spot if they're on vacation.
Very good. And ever recall seeing him parking in the same third section where you would park? Or had parked on some occasions?
Not necessarily, no, sir.
And you're not saying that he didn't,
I just don't remember.
you recall seeing it on some occasions here,
Yes, sir.
correct? All
So
right.
I walked in this way, so it's just a
Very
part of
good.
my routine.
When you came to work, how did you get into this parking lot?
Off of, I think, Cumberland.
Okay.
So this entrance, and we come up and around, and sometimes I would go around, come this way, and then sometimes I would take the long road.
And I know you're very familiar with it because you do this every day, but these ladies and gentlemen want to make sure they're clear. When you come in off Cumberland Parkway, you come up, there's like a hill, an incline, you come up here, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then you can either turn directly by the tree house and take this drive that's close to it and get into the parking lot, or you can go all the way back here to the back, correct?
Yes, sir.
And there are parking lots as far away as the far back corner of the tree house over here, like this car's back again would be toward a tree line that nobody can actually traverse, correct?
Yes, sir.
In fact, there's a whole series of spaces that are all that way that you can back into the tree line that no one else can get to, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And do you recall seeing people out there in the parking lot after you had parked or later in the day, people kind of walking around the parking lot, walking laps for exercise, that sort of thing?
It happens. Yeah, when we have a health challenge, sometimes people are trying to get more steps in.
Very good. And have you seen them actually kind of walking this perimeter out here of some sort?
Yes, sir. They sometimes come from a different building and walk.
Very good. And when you got there at 8:30 in the morning, how full was the parking lot?
Usually these, yeah, there's a tree. Most of these are full.
These being the
I'm
second
sorry, the
row
second
of,
row,
the
yeah.
second section, if you will.
Second section,
Okay.
that first side of it, and there's a few stragglers here. And these tend to be kind of popular. And there are just certain people that always park in the same spot. This spot's always taken, and that spot's always taken. And there's
Again, just so we're clear,
sorry,
when
the
you say
spot-
this
the-
spot, we're
I'm
talking
sorry.
about, that's okay. Just to the left of the tree house,
Mm-hmm.
if you're looking, if we're looking directly at D35, it just, the line just above the side of the tree house, correct?
yes,
That's north, so this would be the north side, correct?
yes, sir.
And I think you said this spot right here in the corner might be taken?
Yes, sir.
Very good. How about all these spots in the back here?
Those are usually if you get there late. And some people who like to walk extra steps, they'll park there intentionally, but for the most part, it's empty.
And one reason why you don't park there, because that's the furthest place away from the treehouse,
Yes,
correct?
sir.
All right. And also, there's not a sidewalk or anything back here behind these spaces, correct?
Not that
It's
I know
just,
of.
as you talk about, it's wood line, it's treed and wooded.
Yes.
Okay. This space right here, next to the island right there, do you recall, have you ever parked there before?
I don't think so.
Okay. Do you remember this tree being there, right there?
Yes, sir.
And these spaces here that are behind it, again, they're also on the wood line, correct?
Yes, sir.
And again, not a space for people to be walking, certainly not very easily unless they're hiking through that rough area, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And again, you're not telling me, ladies and gentlemen, that Mr. Harris didn't park anywhere he wanted to in the lot. You just,
No, I'm not.
sometimes you saw his car in this area.
The pattern was, yes. More than likely when I saw it on this side.
And as far as how many times you saw it, I don't even know if it's more than 10 or less than 10.
I don't know. I
Fair
wouldn't
enough.
wanna,
It was of no interest to you.
right, it was another
Until it's
color,
empty,
another
correct.
part of my pattern as I was walking in. So.
Very good. All right, thank you, ma'am. You can take a seat. Did you ever have to follow up with the detectives to see if they actually pulled any videos to see where Mr. Harris actually parked his car?
I didn't do any follow-up on my own. I was told that happened.
That's what you-
was a subpoena.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's fine.
That's what you were hoping they would do when you talked to them, correct?
Hope is,
When you said it's only fair to take a look at everything.
I wanted them to check and see, just because I wasn't making it up. I wanted it to them to know that I wasn't making something up. I didn't want to be accused of, one way or the other, of making something up.
Very fair. And I think you also indicated when Ross told you about his ear accident, you had no reason to believe he was making that up either, correct?
Yes, sir.
Got you somewhere. On talking about the parking during even just the month of June, whether or not Ross parked in a totally separate area than what you recall seeing on June the 2nd, you wouldn't have any idea, correct?
No, sir. It's way too long ago.
In fact, he could have been parking in that front line right there just to the east of the treehouse, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you don't have any idea where he parked on June 3rd?
No, sir.
Correct. And on June 4th, you wouldn't have any idea if he parked in the middle of the lot as opposed to where you had seen him a few times?
No, sir. I would not know any dates. I didn't keep up with that.
All right. And if he ever parked along the wood line some other days in June, you wouldn't have any idea about that?
Have I ever parked?
No, you wouldn't have any idea about his parking actually along the wood line and not in that front line?
No, sir.
On June 11th, when you recall seeing him come in, do you remember seeing his car in the middle of the lot to the left of the door on that occasion?
I wouldn't have known specifically that it was his car. I just, like I said, when I saw the car, I recognized that I'd seen the car in the lot.
Do you remember seeing him walk from a different area other than straight in that line where you had seen him just a few times?
No, he was coming in the building, so at that point I don't know where he was
You
coming
didn't see
from.
where he came from in the parking lot?
No, sir.
And on June 18th, you just don't have any idea where he parked.
No, sir.
Do you remember talking with the police and telling them that you thought you knew where he parked, but then when you saw them kind of marking off the parking lot, it was in a different space than you thought it was?
Yes, sir. Because I didn't know where he parked on that day until they came afterwards and they kind of cordoned it off, and I think there was an investigation on the premise, sir.
Gotcha. And those spaces were nowhere in that line that you had seen him just park a few times?
Yes, sir.
It was further out to the parking lot.
Yes, sir.
Not in the wood line, correct?
Correct.
Not in the back space.
Correct.
Not in the spaces that you would have to walk the furthest point away.
Yes, sir.
Actually, in the parking lot where people could be walking right beside it as they're walking laps in the parking lot.
I'm sorry.
If people were walking laps in that parking lot,
Yeah.
they could walk right by the back of that car, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, cool.
as a musician, would you ever leave your bass in a car if it was hot outside?
So,
And why would you not do that?
you know, mess with electronics, they're good. Again, my bass is not as temperamental. It's a little bit, built a little bit sturdier. But, you know, it's maybe in like cool weather like this, maybe for a couple of hours, but it changes your intonation, like the strings could, you know, it's heat, so heat makes things expand,
Right.
and everything that is sealed can get broken.
This is Stakes 231. I think this is the same exhibit that we were looking at earlier with the Home Depot treehouse.
Yes, sir.
And I don't need to put it on, back on the easel. Everyone can see it from there. You talked about making the entrance into the treehouse off of, would have been Cumberland, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then you said there are several routes you could take to get to your parking spaces.
Yes, sir.
When you first come in here, whether you take this route, or this route, what hand turn do you have to make to do that?
Right.
They're all rights into the treehouse, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
You never had to look behind you to turn right, did you?
I'm sorry.
You never had to look behind you to look to turn right in this parking lot, did you?
I just if I'm turning on the street, but no, usually no traffic coming in.
Because usually they're pretty early for a lot of folks, isn't it? Thank you.
Nothing further.
You're free to go. Next witness.
We call Brandon Moore.
Be seated, please.
Sir, would you please introduce yourself to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury by telling them your name and then spelling it so the court reporter gets it, okay?
My name is Brandon Moore, BRANDONMOORE.
And Mr. Moore, where do you live? You don't have to give me your address, but where do you live?
I live in Metro Atlanta, just outside of the perimeter.
Okay, where do you work?
Home Depot.
Okay. How long have you worked there?
15 years.
Okay. What's your job there now?
I'm currently a manager of operations for HomeDepot.com.
Back in June of 2014, what was your job at Home Depot?
I was a systems engineer.
Okay. And as a systems engineer, tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury a little bit about what were your job duties on a daily basis? Kind of what did you do?
So I work with dev teams, basically deploying their code to different environments on HomeDepot.com, as well as merging code. Basically working with developers to manage their code.
Okay. And developers, is this like to maintain the website for
Yes.
Home Depot?
Correct.
Okay, do they call y'all .com over there?
Yes, .com. Yeah.
Okay, is that because y'all worked on HomeDepot.com?
Yes, correct.
Okay. When I say over there, did your building have a different name, or did people call it something different than they did the main headquarters for Home Depot across the street?
Yeah, I worked in the treehouse.
Okay. And so was that basically all the .com folks were over there?
It's a portion of the .com has hundreds of people. There's
Okay.
about 100 plus in the treehouse.
Now, did you know a person by the name of Justin Ross Harris?
Yes.
Okay, and how did you know him?
He sat very close to me. He's a developer, and I work with his dev team to deploy the code also.
Now, when he sat near you, did you know him pretty well?
Not very well, just from work.
Okay. So basically, you knew him in work. Did you ever hang out with him outside of work, like going out after work and hanging on the weekends or anything like that?
No, not like that.
You know why we're here about the death of his son, Cooper. Could you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, did you notice anything different about him in the weeks leading up to Cooper's death?
He just seemed a little distant, maybe a little stressed out.
Did you know what was going on at all? If he had anything going on, if it was business, personal, or did you assume it was anything?
I had no idea. I assumed it was probably work related. Yeah.
Now, do you know if he had anything that he was stressed about working on or anything like that at that time, or is that just a general assumption?
Just a general assumption. I mean, we all have deadlines, so.
Right.
constant, at least a weekly deployment. He may have had a project or something on.
And on the actual day in question, did he seem normal that day?
Yes.
And do you remember if you talked to him much that day at all?
Yeah, we actually probably talked a lot that day.
Now, you stated, I think you talked to the police before, back right after this happened, right?
Right.
And you, as far as you saw, did you ever hang out with him and his wife or anything like that?
No.
Okay. From what he put out to you, did you gather he was a good family man, things like that?
Absolutely.
Did he ever say anything about being unhappy with his wife or anything of that nature?
No, not that I can recall.
Do you remember one time when you may have had some conversation with him about what would happen if one of the parties cheated on the other or something of that nature?
Yeah, I'm not sure how it came up, but he said, they both had agreed that, no matter what, they would stay together for the kids. So they wouldn't get divorced.
Okay. So if one person cheated on the other one would just have to suck it up?
Yeah.
Now, did you go on occasion, would you go to lunch with the defendant?
Yes.
Okay. Let me ask you first. You sat near him in the cubicle. Was he hard of hearing or mostly deaf on one side?
Yeah, I can't remember which ear, but he's part deaf in one of his ears.
Okay. And so sometimes you knew that from actually working beside him and things like that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, did you ever go to lunch with him or anything like that?
Yes.
Okay. Like, where would y'all go?
We went to Chick-fil-A, went to a Mexican restaurant near Marietta Square.
There are a lot of places over near where y'all work and
Right.
everything to go eat.
Yeah, we went several places.
And how long did you work with the defendant?
I think he started as an intern about a year before, so maybe about 3 years, maybe. 3 years, 2 years.
Now, on those occasions when you go to lunch with him and you ride in the car, do you ever have any trouble while inside the car hearing you or anything like that?
I can't recall him having trouble.
Do you ever remember him saying anything like, I can't hear you, or having a problem, like responding to you when you're chit-chatting with him in the car?
Can't recall what happened.
Okay. So you never remember that ever happened?
No.
Did you guys have something in common, like a common interest or anything of that nature?
We both like college football. We both like guitars, visiting music sites, basically.
Okay. And with guitars, did you play guitar as well?
I have guitars. I won't say I play them, but
Okay.
okay.
Mess around with them?
Yeah.
All right. Did he tell you anything about his skills with guitars or what he did, if he was active in any organization?
Yeah, he played in a church band, and he was, from what I saw, he was pretty good.
Now, do you remember a time, sometime when it heated up, leading up to the death of Cooper, when you saw the defendant bring his guitar into work?
Yeah, he brought in guitar several times.
Okay. And on this occasion that you talked about, when you talked to the police about it, did you ask him about that, and did the defendant say anything to you about it?
Yeah, he mentioned that he brought it in because, like I say, he brought it in several times, but I guess one day it was particularly hot. Mm-hmm. You don't want to leave your guitar in a hot car. Sticks warped the wood.
So he had remembered to actually bring it into the office that day.
Yeah.
I think that's all I have, Judge.
We're doing okay.
Okay. Thank you.
We did not get a chance to meet, but we did talk on the phone a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
Okay. Right. The work area in the treehouse, y'all work in cubicles, right?
Correct.
And the way they're set up is it's like 4 cubicles where your back would be the 2 guys and the guy next to you, his back would be the 2 guys behind you.
It's like 3 and 3. So.
3 and 3?
Yeah.
All right. And you worked in some proximity to Ross?
Yeah.
Right. Could you actually see his desk from your work area? Yeah. I mean, was he directly behind you, or was
No.
it like catty corner?
Cat a corner, so my cue, somebody behind me, he's the next desk over.
Ross had a picture of Cooper on his desk?
I believe so. I don't recall.
You've seen Cooper before. He'd shown you pictures of Cooper.
Yeah, I've seen him. Yeah.
Okay. And he may have had some little knickknacks that he got from Little Aprons.
Probably.
That sound familiar?
I'm not sure. I mean, yeah, a lot of stuff on his desk. It's been a while.
Okay. All right, and you interviewed with Detective Stoddard and Detective Murphy about a week after Cooper's death. Is that right?
Somewhere around there.
June 25th, 2014?
Yeah, I'll take your word for it.
That's the proximity.
Right.
And your recollection today is the same as it was back then, which was, it was a normal day.
Right. Yeah.
There was nothing remarkable or out of the ordinary about how Ross was acting on that particular day.
Right.
But you do remember that you saw him at the end of the day leaving the parking lot.
Yes.
Okay. And I believe what you said was he was walking out and you saw him give a goofy wave.
Yeah.
Okay.
We both waited.
And we hadn't seen those videos yet.
Okay.
But if we were to see Ross coming out, was kind of doing like this,
Yeah.
would that have been you he was waving at?
Yeah.
Okay. Kind of at the front of the building?
Yes.
Right. And that certainly, from your experience, was in keeping with how Ross acted, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's a very friendly, gregarious, open kind of a guy.
Correct.
Everybody in that building knew who he was.
Correct.
Okay. And so him waving to you, sort of in a spastically, that was business as usual, right?
Yeah, that's how we are.
That's how we are?
Yeah.
Okay.
Usually.
Yeah. And well, let me go ahead and talk to you about that. The department that you work in, the .com, and you use the word dev. That's DEV. That's short for development, right?
Correct.
It's fair to say there's a certain kind of person that is working in y'all's area at Home Depot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Development type. Yeah.
All right. You got to be pretty smart,
Yeah.
and you got to know about computers. You got to be able to read code, sometimes write code,
Right.
understand how the internet works.
Yeah.
A little more complicated. Is that fair to say?
Yes. Correct.
And I think that you and I talked about this before, and Ross certainly fit the personality type that was kind of all you guys, how y'all were sort of, well, I don't want to say juvenile, but sort of silly throughout the day.
Correct.
Okay. Y'all would show each other memes or videos on the computer
Yeah.
or on your phones.
Yeah.
And certainly wasn't uncommon for any of you guys to have several screens up at one time, maybe watching a news show or watching a video or doing something while you were doing your work as well.
Correct.
Just about everybody did it. Okay. You became aware on that day, I believe, on the 18th, that Ross was under some stress because of a problem at work.
Yeah.
All right. And what you learned was you heard a conversation in the break room with a guy named Daryl. Ross and Daryl?
Daryl, yeah, I don't remember the conversation, but
Okay.
I said that 2 years ago.
All right. But when you talked to the detectives, you certainly let them know that Ross was having a problem with what's called a sprint, or a task, and he was behind on it. And there was some conversation that morning about trying to get caught up or getting it straightened out. Do you remember telling the detectives something about that?
I don't remember exactly, but if I said it then that's what it was. It's
All
just
right.
been so long.
I know. Well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but do you recall that was the case?
Yeah, I do recall somewhat. I remember being in the break room talking to him. So,
And Ross's supervisor, not supervisor, but his kind of lead developer in that little area where y'all sit, what's his name?
in the area where we sat, there was Andre.
Andre.
Yeah.
And Andre was kind of like the, sort of the senior guy.
Yeah, senior dip.
So if Ross was, and just so these folks will know, what is a sprint?
Sprint is a short amount of time, probably like 2 weeks, where the dev teams commit to delivering a certain amount of code or fixes that are supposed to go in.
Each person on the team would have a certain task to perform their work, a task, and it's supposed to be completed within the sprint period, which is usually 2 weeks, right?
Right, that's what they committed to together.
Okay. And if the person on the team doesn't complete their task at the end of the sprint, then they're behind.
Correct.
Okay? And there could be consequences for that. Okay. It's even possible to get called in by your supervisor, your manager, or even worse, have someone else have to come behind you and get your work done.
Yeah.
Okay. And you became aware that day over here in this conversation that in the break room with Daryl, that that's what was going on with Ross that day.
I believe so.
You and Ross would, you said, occasionally go to lunch, and you think y'all worked together for more than a year?
Yes, I think so, yeah. Like I said, he was an intern, and then he became an associate. So I worked together with him as an intern and associate.
Okay. Y'all weren't close buddies, though?
No. Close at work, we hang out.
Yeah.
We sat very close, but outside of work.
You were work colleagues?
Correct.
Right. But you didn't go to lunch with him every week?
Not every week. We may go twice in a week. We may not go, 1 week.
All right. Did you ever go to lunch with Alex Hall or Winston Milling?
I don't know those. I'm pretty sure I know those people, but I don't. If you show me a picture, I wouldn't be able to name one or the other. I remember possibly meeting them for lunch one day, at least one of them. I don't believe those people worked in the treehouse. So.
Okay. And you're not aware of when Ross would go to lunch with those guys, you're not aware of where they would go or if they would pick Ross up? You're not aware of those circumstances if you didn't go with them?
No. I mean, if they were going to go together, they could come pick them up from the treehouse because I believe they worked in the SSC.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. But you did occasionally go to lunch with Ross, and you know we love Chick-fil-A.
Yes.
And sometimes y'all go to Chick-fil-A.
Correct.
Right. And it's fair to say that when you went to Chick-fil-A, all right, so I'm going to show you this that's been admitted. May take you a while to get oriented to it. Does this look familiar if I were to tell you that maybe this was Starbucks, that was Chick-fil-A, and that's Cumberland Parkway?
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Can you step on down here just for a sec to help me? All right, so if you can orient yourself, could you see where Chick-fil-A is? This one right here?
Yep.
Okay. You step back right over there to the side. Okay. All right, and this is Starbucks?
Correct.
And this intersection here is, this is Cumberland Parkway?
Yep.
So this would be Pace's Ferry. And you would agree if y'all went for lunch, this would be the Chick-fil-A you go to?
Yes.
All right, and you would, to get back to the office, you take a right on Cumberland Parkway, and then do a little U-turn here, and then you just go straight through the intersection,
Correct.
right?
Yep.
It was basically a straight shot back to the treehouse.
Yes.
Is that fair to say? And did you ever go to Chick-fil-A for breakfast with Ross?
I'm not sure. I remember eating chicken biscuits and him having chicken, but I don't know if we ever went together to
Right.
the place for breakfast. Yeah.
But you're aware, he went to Chick-fil-A very regularly, almost every day for breakfast, didn't he?
On a regular basis, yes.
Okay. In fact, he would bring it back in to the office sometimes.
Yes.
All right, you can have a seat.
Okay, thanks.
That's fine. And when he did, he would often eat Chick-fil-A at his desk.
Yes.
And you know what he'd have?
I eat chicken biscuits, maybe like 2 biscuits. So I don't know if it's always chicken biscuits. But
Sausage biscuit or whatever.
yeah.
Okay. But that's something you saw him do very regularly.
Yes.
All right. You actually went with Ross one time to visit Cooper at Little Aprons, right?
Yeah, we went to SSC for some reason. I don't remember what we carpooled. He's like, "Hey, you want to go see Cooper?" It's like, "Oh, sure." So
Okay. Was it just during a break during the day, or?
we went over for. It could have been for a meeting. Could have been for an event. I can't remember why we went, but we went over there. And I think I drove, and he's like, "Yeah, you want to go see my son in Little Aprons?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." I've never been to Little Aprons. So.
All right. And y'all walked in, and Cooper was in there, and Ross got to see him and visit with him,
Yes.
and show him off to you. All right. Well, let's just get right down to it and sort of cut to the chase here. You know from sitting next to Ross that he loved that little boy, don't you?
Objection, that's speculation. You can ask him what he saw, what he said.
Assistant.
You heard Ross talk about that little boy all the time, didn't you?
Yes, a lot.
And Ross shared pictures of Cooper with everybody around him, didn't he? Ever about his little boy, did you? In fact, Ross specifically told you that they loved that little boy so much they wouldn't get divorced no matter what the other one did.
Yeah, he said they would never get divorced because of Cooper.
Because they loved him that much. They loved him that much.
I don't remember the exact words, but he said he wouldn't. They would never get divorced because of Cooper.
Tell me about what kind of stuff that y'all would talk about at work. What sort of subjects?
A lot of football.
Mm-hmm.
He went to Bama, so I'm about the Crimson Tide and how good they were. I'm a UGA fan mostly, so talk about football, music, guitars, just random stuff, news headlines.
Right. Random stuff. How random are we talking?
Completely random.
Completely random.
I guess hard for me to pinpoint because it's just
Basically, any subject you could possibly imagine, it would fit into the category of stuff that y'all talked about.
right.
Okay. Y'all are fact checkers, aren't you?
Yes.
Ross was a fact checker. Okay. Y'all spent a lot of time looking up facts and checking things on your phone or on the computer, didn't you?
Right.
You got any examples that come to mind? Any of this randomness we're talking about?
I don't know, just but as developers, you Google everything, right? If you have a question, you don't ask somebody, you Google it.
Okay.
There was one I think I mentioned before. It's about someone said 90% of the shrimp we eat in America are really shrimp. There's some other thing that are very akin to shrimp. So I remember Ross looking it up, Googling that fact, and showing us. Yeah, it's not, 90% aren't really shrimp.
90% of the shrimp we eat aren't really shrimp.
Right.
Okay. And that's not uncommon, or that wasn't uncommon, just the wildly random sort of subjects that y'all would look up, or that Ross would look up.
Yeah.
Google, search, and research. Is that fair to say?
Just a few famous last words, follow-up. So when you're talking about, you guys would do a lot of research on random things at work and things like that, right?
Yeah.
And so sometimes when you're like, do you ever use the website Reddit or anything like that?
I don't use Reddit on a regular basis, but a lot of people are on it constantly.
Okay. And if you're on there and you're in like a news, I guess a category or something like that, you know, as part of y'all's research, if you see something you're interested in, you may click on it and go watch a video or learn more about it, right?
Correct.
You research it to gain information about it, right?
Yes.
By clicking on a link or clicking on a video.
Correct.
So naturally, that's research to you, right?
Right.
The morning of, I know Mr. Kilgore asked you several questions about how the defendant would say he loved his child and things like that. To you, did he ever share with you what he was doing at work in addition to what you could see?
No.
Could you see his phone and what he was doing on his phone?
No.
Okay. So you wouldn't have known that while he's supposed to be stressed out about all this job and getting these jobs done, that he's constantly messaging other women?
Yeah, no, I did.
Okay. That wouldn't help him get his work done, would it?
I would think not.
So if you were doing that stuff, you know, that side of Ross would be something completely different than what you saw, correct?
Correct.
And that morning of June 18, 2014, he never voiced to you that he needed an escape from his son, did he?
No.
So if he voiced that to somebody else, that would be a different side of him, correct?
Yeah.
Also, you talked about you guys' computer, I'm not going to call you a dork, but I guess I just did.
Okay. That's cool.
I'm a dork in different ways, but you guys know computers, programming codes, things like that, right? Is anything in your job involve forensic examination or analysis and investigation into phones or anything like that?
Not analysis like that, no.
No.
Maybe you have to know, like, the browser for the phone.
Right. You know, a browser and things like that. You don't know, y'all don't learn how to go in and what it takes to extract information from a phone for use later at trial or anything like that, right?
No.
That's way out of y'all's realm.
It's definitely out of my realm. So.
Okay. You see, I know this wasn't shown for you, but it's still up on the screen. You see on this screen the defendant got his cup and his Chick-fil-A bag right there, right?
Yep.
Like many times you said he would come in and eat at his desk, correct?
Yes.
So naturally, if he were walking in with just a cup, he would have already eaten, right?
Most likely, yeah.
So if he sat down with a cup and no bag, it's obvious to him he's already eaten, right?
I would assume he would have eaten already. Yeah.
That's all I have.
Or it could be he ate one biscuit in the car and had one they were bringing in, right?
Right. Yeah.
So y'all know a good bit about computers. If Ross wanted to wipe his computer clean, he certainly got the ability to do that, doesn't he?
Yeah, you could pretty much. I guess if you had knew exactly how to do that, you
And y'all weren't social buddies outside of work.
could. Right.
You didn't go drinking beer with him and stuff.
May have been to a happy hour or two, but it wasn't regular.
And if he was meeting up with a woman that wasn't his wife, you wouldn't expect that wouldn't be the kind of thing he'd share with you, would you?
No.
Okay. Y'all weren't that close.
Correct.
Thank you.
The way he tried to portray himself to you and other people, though, that would be a big contradiction, wouldn't it, if he was seeing other
I'm
women?
gonna object to the form of the question that's leading and suggestive.
Okay, I'll rephrase it.
Misleading.
Okay. If he were doing things like that, the way he portrayed himself to you and with his family and children, if he was, or child, if he was actually doing all these other things, would that be a huge contradiction?
Yes, it would have been a surprise.
Would have been different than the way he portrayed himself to you?
Correct.
Very different.
Yes.
But what you personally observed and heard regarding his relationship with his son was all positive, loving, and affirming, wasn't it?
Correct.
Thank you.
Nothing for the judge.
You're free to go. Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a lunch break. It is 4 after. Let's break till 1:15. Close your pads, open mind, close mouth, have a good lunch.